row could have been a pretty solid victory for Sanders because they fit the New Hampshire, they fit the very white, very liberal state demo. They fit the very populist kind of progressive state character. So I would expect it more there than in the South. But I mean, Elizabeth Warren splitting is clearly giving Biden these what are going to turn into delegate victories, and popular vote pluralities. And in terms of the youth voter turnout, I had also seen a couple of talking heads on the New York Times live results analysis mentioning that, and it looks like the older voters are turning out in higher numbers, in a higher proportion than they did, which is really, like, that shows some kind of crazy old voter revolution, which you would never have expected to see given Biden's tendency not to energize voters. But I feel like Buttigieg and Klobuchar dropping out and uniting the moderate movement behind him really made a huge difference here. And a lot of voters made up their minds in the last couple of days. South Carolina had a huge boost for him in momentum. So even though, and youth voters, as Stanley said, they don't tend to turn out in huge numbers. So looks like the old voters are still a super powerful force in the electorate.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the biggest thing that happened in this race so far, that's really determining the biggest the outcome that we're seeing tonight, is but South Carolina, like that. I think it really put Joe Biden up on the pedestals. That's going to be the moderate candidate. That's who we are working towards getting elected to stop Bernie Sanders, and that made Amy Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg drop out and endorse Biden. I mean, and also I think boosted him a lot with black voters, where Bernie was trending up and getting closer and closer to Biden beforehand, especially with the win in Nevada and New Hampshire coming back to back. He had all the momentum. People were thinking he was going to run away with it. Then South Carolina happens. Black voters come out supporting Biden in big numbers, and you see a massive kind of switch of momentum as now Biden is starting to look more and more like the front runner back again. I think at this point, coming out of Super Tuesday, I'd say he probably will be. But and it really is insane. Joe Biden had one field office in Virginia, was outspent 7-1 by Sanders, and almost 100-1 by Bloomberg in all Super Tuesday states. He had barely campaigned in any states, and yet we see the results we see tonight. So, yeah, I think. Do you subscribe to my theory, guys, that South Carolina had a big impact? Let's start with James Stanley.
I think South Carolina was the booster for Biden. I think that it was the life support that his campaign sort of needed. But overall, I mean, I really think that what seriously changed the entire aspect of this race. Okay, now this is more for Klobuchar's perspective. She had a lot of elder, not very old people, but older people, 55 plus, 45 plus, that type of group supporting her for her primary race against everyone. Really, I mean, Klobuchar really didn't really have too many young people supporting her, and it seems like a lot of that type of base also mixed with the older people who supported Buttigieg had really kind of teamed up and just went out in mass numbers and voted for Biden in many of the states here. I mean, Minnesota, which had a lot of early people, early voting. A lot of people did early voting. We don't even see Klobuchar on the list right now. So not many people did early voting. People were kept on saying a lot of early voting was occurring in that state, but it seems like really not that much was occurring. But I definitely do think that South Carolina had an effect. But I think that what had a bigger effect of it was Klobuchar and Buttigieg dropping out. And it seems like that those supporters actually took their endorsements seriously and went out in mass numbers to vote for Biden, which I think really was the one key aspect that really helped Biden tonight do very well.
James, what do you think Biden's key to success is tonight?
Definitely Buttigieg and coalescing around a single moderate candidate, because they had really divided up the moderate lane quite a lot. And if you always added up their percentage in the other primaries, the moderate vote is huge, and it's always at least as of recently, it's always had the edge over the progressive vote in totals, especially in those earlier states. But I also think South Carolina gate showed that Biden actually was capable of winning elections and still definitely was a major factor in the race because a lot of people were writing him off. But then when it got to a state where Buttigieg and Steyer also took a lot of the center lane vote away from people like Warren and Buttigieg and to some extent Klobuchar. But I just think the establishment really rallied around Biden, and they're now putting a lot of machinery behind him, especially now that he's the moderate favorite son. So once Bloomberg drops out, or in the event Bloomberg drops out, I should say, that then I think it might put Biden over, especially if the Super Tuesday momentum that he gets out of this doesn't fade. So Biden's in a good place after tonight. Honestly, he's really
definitely
shoring up and tying up the loose ends of his coalition. So we'll see it go head to head with Sanders in the future. But this is a really good sign for him.
The delegate count so far: 137 Joe Biden to 99 for Senator Bernie Sanders. And if Whisper of a Dream, he does well when at 11 p.m. when California comes rolling around, that could, I think, really be his savior for Super Tuesday. If Bernie Sanders, who's been organizing the hell out of that state, does well in California, that could make what looks like a pretty rough night look just a little bit better. So, and these are, again, not the final delegate counts. There's still going to be delegates that are going to be awarded to Biden in other states. And it looks like, by the way, Bernie is up now in Maine and Texas by a pretty fair share. In Massachusetts, Biden is leading by, he's leading by 7, I believe. So, yeah, that is actually, it's 6.9. If I'm doing my math there right on the fly. But, so that's pretty much, this is a quick overview of the race. And, so California, I think California is going to be very, very, I think Mike Casca is the spokesperson for Bernie Sanders, saying that it could fundamentally change the race if Sanders wins Texas and California. James Stanley, how important do you think that's going to be? And could those two big wins in those two big states stem the flow of Biden momentum, both in the delegate count and in the media coverage and the overall narrative that's going to play out after this, which I think is going to be very important as well, almost as important as the delegate count?
Yeah, I mean, I just would say that Texas and California win would definitely be good for Sanders. Overall, Biden's going to win a lot of states tonight, and Sanders is not going to win 100% of the 415 delegates.
Yeah.
He's going to win definitely a good amount of them. He's not going to win 100% of the 228 Texas delegates. But however, I do actually see Texas as a tilt for Biden, according to New York Times, his little predictor needle. Just to put that out there.
Yeah, that is true. That's true. It's disturbing.
Yeah, but overall, I think that if both of those states went for Sanders, definitely would be good. Now, will it calm the media down? I mean, I'm going to be quite honest with you. No, I don't think it will, because I think the media will be looking at all of the states, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9 states that Biden is up right now in, which are really quite. I mean, look, I'm going to give it to Biden. He did it pretty well. I mean, like you were talking about how he only had one office in Virginia. I'm not shocked. I mean, Virginia was going to be a state that Biden was going to do well in. I'm actually a little bit shocked that Bloomberg didn't do as good as I would have imagined, because he was really exploiting the airwaves there. And also, the people who live in Virginia are, to be quite frank, are the people who would typically vote for Bloomberg. Wealthier, more moderate people who, typically like Bloomberg's policies of moderation and just getting things done. I mean, that's what he's trying to campaign on. I don't necessarily know if that's the truth, but, people, again, sadly, a lot of people go off the TV ads, and that's how they make their voting decisions in this country. But overall, I think that if Bernie does get California, which seems like he definitely will get a good amount of it, and a good amount of Texas delegates, I think it definitely will be good for him tonight. I don't think the media will be quiet, though, however, about it, to be 100% honest with you.
Yeah, I think any kind of excuse to really make anoint Joe Biden the front runner again is going to be welcome for them. But this is the progressive commentator Crystal Ball on Twitter saying, if Warren had dropped out and endorsed Bernie when the centrists dropped and endorsed Biden, progressives would have had a fighting chance. She stayed in so she could get a third in her home state. I think this is probably the second biggest storyline of that, and something that really should be highlighted. The fact that Elizabeth Warren staying in the race, like it's really kind of shameful. It seems obvious that she had dropped out, simultaneously endorsed Bernie 2 days ago. I think that would have really made a counter narrative that would have been so huge for Bernie Sanders. So this is a little bit disturbing. Associated Press has just declared Joe Biden the winner of the Minnesota primary, and that is with
22% reporting.
Yeah, 22% reporting, and Biden only up by 3.9. So they must be seeing something in terms of where they expect the votes to come in. Yeah, so that's I think the biggest and probably the most devastating blow yet for Bernie Sanders tonight. James Weld, would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I really thought there were a lot more states that he had a fighting chance and that seemed to have gone pretty horribly. Yeah. I mean, Virginia definitely, North Carolina, after South Carolina, large population of black voters to be expected. Tennessee, same thing, but Minnesota is a lot of the same demographic as Iowa, and that's a horrible sign for Bernie, considering how he did in Iowa. But then it makes you remember that he only did win a plurality of the popular vote. And if you add up the moderates' share, I mean, it's huge. Having Buttigieg and Klobuchar in the race really, really bottlenecked Biden, and having Warren in the race, especially when you consider how well Warren is projected to do in California, I could see it going, maybe not as extreme, but going like Massachusetts, because she's polling fairly high there, and she's going to end up taking a significant share of the voters. I still think he's going to get the majority of the delegates out of California. He has a really strong base there, but Warren also has a lot of appeal with the hugely progressive state. Massachusetts looks like it might go to Biden, considering how the votes have been split, and California might not go to Biden, but it could still, the margins might not be enough to offset Biden's momentum. Texas, I don't even know what's going on in Texas. Bernie's up by 5 points right now, but they're projecting him tilting Biden, and his lead has been kind of hopping up and down a little bit, and it's been leapfrogging a little back and forth. So we'll see what happens. I am unfortunately going to have to get off at this time.
All right, James
it's
Wells.
Been wonderful. It's been a fantastic time. Thank you for having me on the show, definitely.
Really, really appreciate it. Hope you decide to come back in the future. James Weld making his SWN debut.
Definitely will.
James, thank you so much.
It's good to talk to you, Stanley. It's good to talk to you, Spencer. I will see you guys later.
Yeah, thanks for your insight.
All right.
Bye.
See you.
See you. Also, I just want to mention that Arkansas got called for Biden as well.
All right, that's not much of a
not really too important, but
yeah,
not really too important, but definitely just wanted to bring that out there. Also, Maine is Sanders is now leading Maine, by the way.
By how much?
380 votes.
Damn, that's tight. Yeah, so Maine looking very tight, and very also something tight. That I think people 22% aren't really talking that much about is Bernie's going to get a good share of delegates out of North Carolina, though. So what's the other state? He is going to get a good bump out of I think Tennessee as well.
Yeah, so Tennessee.
He'll get some delegates out of Tennessee.
Oklahoma. 10
points above the viability there. So yeah, but it's definitely not anything that they wanted. Time still hasn't called it yet. Biden up by 5. Bernie is up by 5 in Texas as well. was we wait for 2 more results in quite likely Sanders states, but still a pretty rough night all around. Minnesota and Massachusetts, the two